So next up, we're going to get into working with images. This starts on page 269 in your text. It's a bit of an interesting chapter. Not too sure how much everybody here is working with images, but some of this may seem like a review of some basics for you. We start by looking at the different types of images you'll be working with in the web. JPEG supports many colors and is typically going to be used for a regular picture, say of an event or something along those lines. They can be compressed a good deal, which is nice, and if done correctly, you don't lose too much quality. The GIFs and PNGs are a little bit better with compression. You don't lose quality, which is good. GIFs, I don't see them very much these days unless somebody's using an animated GIF for some reason, which is usually a little silly. PNG, sort of the standard for various logos oftentimes, although the author makes a point to mention that there's limited support still for PNGs on mobile devices, so keep that in mind. Also, make sure you're not using RAW, which is rare, or bitmap images, as these are not compressed. They don't work well in the web. Here's some typical JPEG images. Lots of colors, pretty standard. And here's typical GIF images. Fewer colors usually, and sometimes animated. This would usually be stacked on top of each other, and it would alternate between the two, and it would look as though the globe were spinning. Some attributes of the image tag you need to be aware of, the most important being source. You just simply point to the location of the image file. We'll see how to do that in Apex when it's in the shared components toward the end here. Question came in, is the PNG the only type that allows for transparency? No, the GIFs can allow for transparency, but JPEGs cannot. That's a good question. So the source is the most important, points to the actual image. Alt, you'll want to make sure to specify that. That's going to be displayed. It's just a text string in place of the image if the image fails to load for whatever reason. And users will see this if they're using a screen reader as well. So if the source is pointing to your logo, in our case SkillBuilders logo, the alt you might want to just say SkillBuilders logo. The height and width are obviously used just to set the height and width of the image. Now, the recommendation of the author is that you use the height and width attributes, and we're talking about the image tag. We're still in HTML. A lot of the values you see that affect the way something renders are also, they have equivalents in CSS. And in this case, we're talking about the HTML attributes, not the CSS rules. So height and width, the author recommends you use those, and you set them to the actual value, the correct size of the image. And that can be a little bit tedious, but the idea is when the image is being loaded, the browser can set aside enough space to allow them to come in, but continue rendering the page while they're coming in, usually via a separate thread. So will that make a lot of difference? I think it depends if your site is image heavy or not. If it's really heavy on images, then it's probably best you go ahead and do this. If it's not, it's probably going to make very little difference these days. Of course, we have the same attributes in CSS, and the idea would be that you would use height and width in CSS to scale the image. So if you want to make it larger or smaller than the actual size, that's where you would use the CSS attributes. But be careful with that. Ultimately, if you can scale the image ahead of time using some kind of image processing software and then get it up on the server in the right size, that's definitely the best way to do it. It's going to be the most performant. Here's some basic HTML for 2 images using the height and width attributes. Some CSS that is different, so this is scaling the size of the images down, and then how that would render in the browser. Here we see some properties you can use to help vertically align your images, and this is going to be part of the challenge today for you guys in the workshop. So the property is vertical align, and of course there's I should probably just throw this out there, there's also text align, and when you have a containing element around an image you have to use both of those properly. Now the vertical align is obviously for your vertical space, and then you have these common values, and it depends on how you're trying to align the image with what. So top, middle, and bottom all relate to the containing element and perhaps inline elements, whereas text bottom and text top refer to text nodes within the containing element, adjacent elements. So just select the right one for what it is you're trying to do, and you may need to experiment with these until you become comfortable with them to get it to align properly. Here we have 3 images, and they're put inside of a paragraph tag. So paragraph tag is a block level element, and within that we have an image, and within that you see a text node wrapped in a B tag followed by Murroc and ending the period. Now, the image is an inline element. The B is inline. So these are going to align right next to each other. The question is, how exactly will they align? And we can use that vertical align to tell it how we want it to align. So in this case we're saying middle, which will align the midpoint of the image with the midpoint of the containing block. And when they render in a browser, we get this nice, flow here. The default would have come in like this had we not styled it with CSS. These little things can get annoying. Again, you just got to know the property, the potential values, play with them till you get what you're looking for. We talked yesterday about float and clear. This is very common to see with images as well, and it works very much like what we saw yesterday. Remember, when you float something, you're taking it out of the normal flow, and you're positioning it left or right via the float of the containing element. And then the other elements, the elements that follow, they want to move into the space that was previously occupied by the element that's then floated. And all elements will continue to fall into that space until you use clear on an element.